Welcome back, everybody, to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Runyon about his book, The Assault on Elisha Green. All right, but before we get started, I wanted to share a bit of praise again for his book. This is coming from Charles L. Davis, professor at the University of Kentucky. A fine piece of narrative history. Runyon has done a masterful job in connecting the events in Elisha Green's life as a slave and his time as a free person of color to the broader historical context of slavery in Kentucky. The Assault on Elisha Green has much to offer in expanding our knowledge of racial history at a time when such knowledge is sorely needed. Very high praise. And again, want to thank Dr. Runyon for coming on and encourage everybody to go out and get his book on Amazon and other places as well. So without anything else, we will start the show.
What Kentucky meant to him. This land between the meadows was the name that the Wyandot, Kantawa.
You know, they'd always say Paducah is halfway between Monkey's Eyebrow and Possum Trot.
I moved to Lexington in 1996 to attend University of Kentucky College of Law.
I was born in the great state of Kentucky in Pike County at the Pikeville Methodist Hospital.
Grew up on Short Street in downtown Lexington.
I grew up in northern Kentucky.
Contrary to popular belief, Western Kentuckians are still just as Kentucky.
And met my wife there. She's from Lawrence County, Kentucky, and I never had any notion of leaving after I got here.
My whole family is still, we're generational. We've been there in Ballard I was able to know my great-grandparents and, obviously hear lots of stories about my great-great-grandparents.
We got to work on a movie, explores Kentucky culture and history and the stories of why.
How many hours do you think it took you? This is just how much, to write the book, research it, all that stuff.
Research, let me think. Let's see. I probably started it in 2017 and I finished it in 2019 initially. I think 2 years research or 3 years research, and then a year writing it, and then 6 months revising it after they said it's a little too long. So, yeah. I've gotten faster. I've written another book, if it becomes a book, that took less than a year. I started it in November of last year, and I submitted it at the beginning of this month, October.
Oh, wow.
So
that was one of my questions, which I'll save it to the end. What's your next plans? But you already got those sorted out. But before, I don't think I ever showed a picture of Frank Bristow.
There we go.
Yeah,
Bristow.
Bristow, yeah. Interesting dude, a musician by trade, right? And
yeah,
he too has a bit of an interesting story as far as
he does.
The man, I guess, if you want to say him. However,
right.
Complex guy.
His politics are interesting because he fought for the Union in the Civil War, and it was not when the war first broke out, but I think maybe 1862 that he felt the patriotic need to enlist. But he mainly saw an opportunity as a musician to, instead of carrying a rifle, to carry a drum. And he succeeded. He was kind of a band leader, and he serenaded Sherman on his wanderings through. Well, he wasn't wandering; he was quicker than that. Through Georgia, his march through Georgia was serenaded by Bristow. So I thought, well, isn't it strange that there he is, coming from the middle of Illinois, as he did. that he joined the Union Army, and yet he was such a Southern racist after the war. And he's proud he claims he's from Alabama when he's not. He'd only lived there a while, where he had a music job. But it gets more complicated when you realize that his father, a Southern Baptist preacher originally from Kentucky, got a job at a church in Jacksonville, Illinois, and was a Copperhead, was a Southern sympathizer in the North, and actually ran for office. So that's where the racism comes from. But I'm trying to figure out, is there some kind of Oedipal conflict between father and son? And the father being a Copperhead, did the son just intentionally go the other way and join the Union Army? And then afterward realize, well, I'm really more like my dad than I thought I was. And I'm a Southern racist as well. So I'll play that role.
Another thing that I kind of find interesting, how fast he was to move a job. Like, it seemed like he had his stint in Alabama, but I mean, he had a lot of little jobs at it. I mean, one of them he never even made it there to, I believe, and was already accepted another job before he got there.
Right. He was in Texas, he was in Missouri, later in Tennessee. But it was usually a job with a school. So every September, there might be some turnover. There might be an opportunity to go to a better or a job, or you might get fired from the one you're in. But I don't know that he did, because he seemed to be pretty successful with teaching music in a school situation like chorus and band. And then he had this other side career of calisthenics.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And he came up with the whole routine. I mean, is that what it is, or?
Yes, he did. There were other calisthenists who wrote books about their routines too, but he was very organized in that way. It's kind of like a combination of marching band on a football field, except it's inside on a stage or in a gym, on a gym floor, done to music. And he'd play the piano, or have one of the students play the piano, and he, in his book, that from which that picture is taken, he gives detailed instructions on what to do in terms of the gyrations of the movements. They would go do circles, and they would carry batons, and he didn't want to carry Indian clubs, but other groups did, because he thought they were too dangerous, and I think he's right. But throwing them up in the air, what they look like bowling pins, but much more dangerous.
But so,
and I've seen his music. Yeah.
Well, I mean, is there a way to? I guess where could somebody check that out if they wanted to see it? I mean, that'd be pretty interesting to go with or check out.
The calisthenics or the?
Well, either or. Honestly, either one is pretty interesting.
Well, it's all in the Library of Congress. If you look in the footnote, I'll give the title of the book he published around 1891, from which that line drawing a picture of him is taken, and he gives detailed instructions on what movements to make and what costumes to wear. He would dress these female students in like Russian peasant costumes. It was kind of cute, with skirts and blouses and.
Well, the Library of Congress is awesome. I spend a lot of time on there.
I know you know about the Library of Congress, but that's where it is, and his music is there too.
Okay,
there are maybe 30, at least 30 pieces for piano, and then for songs and choruses that he got copyrighted and online.
And I feel like after like I said, you set them up. You kind of tell each of these main three characters' stories, and then they come together in the climax of the event and such. But I feel like Bristow and Gould, or that's that right? Gould.
Gould, yeah.
Gould. Yeah. They seem like a good match for each other. Like they really probably seem like they got along.
Yeah, in fact, they thought they were going to make a team because I think Gould was very happy when he got Bristow to apply for the music job in Millersburg, because the person who preceded him was too smart for Gould, just like Mrs. Tarrant was too smart for Gould.
Yeah, yeah.
He was someone who was more academically trained as a musician than perhaps Bristow. Bristow was good, but didn't maybe have the European style training of his predecessor. So Gould and Bristow collaborated, for example, on a setting of some hymn, right, set to the tune of Swanee River, a poem that Gould wrote about how wonderful heaven is, with jasper walls and harps of gold and so forth, and they would sing it in Paris or in Louisville at church meetings, and Bristow thought up the tune for it, although he didn't plagiarize it, but he combined this pre-existing Swanee River tune with it. I forgot what I was going to say, but that was part of it. Yeah.
I was going to show here a picture of Maysville. And I think this picture is, I think it's 1840s, I believe.
I think so. I think it appears in the first Collins history.
Yeah. But just, and you talk about Maysville. I mean, gosh, we could have a whole podcast about Maysville and Washington and all those areas. But one of the first kind of big settlements, I know, people will which was first. I'm pretty sure Washington was established first, but it was very small, and then Maysville kind of over time has engulfed it. But nice little river town. I mean, it's a nice place to go. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But I got another.
I like going there. Yeah.
Oh, another picture of Mason County, and for those who may not know, I guess you would call Mason County in the northeastern part of the state, but is it by Boone or Bracken?
Bracken is neighbors it. Boone is a little several counties west, towards Cincinnati, sort of northeast, but not quite as east as Ashland. So
go ahead. You said
not as far, not as far into the northeastern part of the state as the city of Ashland. Maysville is on what's called the outer bluegrass, and it's not quite Appalachia. You were talking about Washington and Maysville growing up together, but separately. In the beginning, Washington was more thriving than Maysville, and partly that's because Maysville, until 1795, was subject to Indian attack, because they could, come down in boats or cross from the Ohio. Whereas Washington did have its Indian attacks, but not nearly as many, because it was 4 miles inland. And for a while, Washington, even after 1795, was growing bigger than Maysville. And it was the original county seat of Mason County, Washington was. And then Maysville caught up and profited from the river trade and became the county seat in mid-1840s.
Back to the story here. One thing I found probably very typical of the time was how Gould, during the trial and all this, tried to paint, I guess, used a lot of stereotypes, tried to paint Elisha as this kind of big, vicious guy, and he kind of instigated it all, even though there was really he didn't do anything wrong really to speak of. But another book that I had read and we talked about a while back on the show was the Ashton Tragedy. And at some point, this was the 1881, so right along the same time, one of the people there tried to say that these three African American men had showed up. They were the ones who were guilty. But kind of a typical thing of the time, it seems like, for just whoever is, if there's an African American involved, we're going to blame them or create a story to kind of see if that goes their way. But surprisingly, it doesn't work out for O'Gould as one may expect.
Right.
But again, testimony to his character as being a sleazeball.
I think it probably is the case that physically Elisha was imposing. I've never seen his height, but I think he probably was maybe closer to 6 feet than to 5 feet. And that's a wonderful.
Gould was closer to 5 feet.
Gould was short, actually. You're right. We know his height. I don't forget what it is. It was like 5'2" or 5'3" or 5'4", right? Yeah. So, but you're right. It didn't work, and I think it's because the trial took place in Paris, and the jurors knew Green from his having this church in Paris. I mean, every other Sunday. There was a split in the jury between there are 3 members of the jury from the city and the rest of the juries from the county, and the few members from the city wanted to award him the full or something close amount of restitution financially, and the people in the county didn't want to give him anything, and so they compromised by awarding him $25 from each of Bristow and Gould. Of course, $25 you have to multiply it by 30 to know what it's really worth. I mean, 26.7. Did I just say 30? Yeah. So we're talking $800 or something.
So with I guess anything else about the story you want to mention that, again, I think it's a great book. I would highly encourage people to go out and get it. Anything else in the story that you want to bring up before, or just in general?
I would like to talk a bit about the last chapter, where I talk not only about the last years of Green, but the coming of segregation on the railroads, and to point out how surprising it is that in 1888 there was no segregation on a railroad. And that it was trumped up because of a case of a woman who suffered because there was a fight on a train between Louisville and Frankfurt in 1890 or 91. That they said, it's the poor white people on the trains. They're subject to peril because they're black people on the train, which was totally wrong. And the particular incident that they used to justify passing this law in the state legislature, as I take the time and trouble to point out, and I don't think anyone else has pointed it out in what I can read about the separate coach act, is that they didn't understand what really happened. It was misreported in the papers, and the only clear account we can get of it is when it went on appeal to the Kentucky Supreme Court, and a judge wrote his decision, and he actually says what really happened. And it was nothing like what people were told in the papers happened. It was nothing like what the legislatures thought happened, and for that false reason, they passed this stupid law. It's also because, it's Kentucky generally, it's often been said, was neutral in the Civil War, but became Confederate after the Confederacy lost the war. And as you go deeper into the 19th century, the 1880s, 1890s, it becomes more and more racist and Confederate. And so that's why in the early 1890s. So when he rode the train constantly, he had actually Elisha suffered no disparity of treatment. He suffered no injustice. In fact, the conductor stood up for him.
Yeah, and that was
Bristow and Gould.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting interesting event. That honestly a bit expected, but until they passed those laws, that was, I mean, no one really, I guess they followed the rules that they had. But it's so interesting how Gould being this pastor, but he's telling these lies, just trying to cover himself up or to try to make it more beneficial to himself. There's a lot about him, I guess. But wild story. You talk about these other books that you had written, and whenever I was looking through some of them, I was like, well, these might be more podcasts in themselves or more episodes in themselves to talk about, because you've got quite a bit here.
Well, thanks. I'll send you information. About those two in particular, Delia Webster and the Mentels, because I think that would. And I'd even, it's not a book yet, but the one I've just finished is about Sally Ward and her family. They were kind of royalty of Louisville in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, okay.
She had a brother who was a murderer, got off, and then she was the belle of Kentucky. She was the belle of the South. She was an internationally famous beauty who had 4 husbands.
Oh,
but
wow!
Not at the same time. She only divorced the first. The rest died in harness.
That did pop in my head. Surely not at the same time, but very very interesting story, especially the ones connected to Kentucky. Now, at the beginning too, you talked about teaching French. So did you teach speaking French? I assume is that
Yes, right.
Yes. I took in high school. I had the choice between taking French and Spanish, and I took French, but it did not stick.
Brave man.
Spanish
might be easier.
In my older years, I was like, what was I thinking? Spanish would have been more likely. I would use Spanish than French at any time.
Certainly more useful. Yeah.
yeah.
But because I knew French, that was a great help in the Mentel book, because I had over 100 letters in French that were in manuscript.
Wow.
That I could decipher, and
that's pretty good.
That was fun.
I gotta say too, I gotta tell one on myself. So I make these short videos about important Kentucky people and where people get their county names. Well, Fayette gets it from Marquis de Lafayette. It's one of my most watched little videos, and I was like real hyped about it. I telling my friend, I was like, man, this video is getting a lot of views. It's so cool. And he watched it and he said, you pronounced his name wrong. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's not Marcus. It's not Marcus. It's Marquis. And I was
Marcus.
I was like, man. I was like, oh, that's a blooper. But no, it is. That's all right. I
well, maybe in Pennsylvania or Virginia, in the Revolutionary War, and that's how they pronounced it. I mean, not he, but the American. Maybe it's how George Washington pronounced it. Knows it.
Yeah, that's what I'll stick to. I'm using the colonial accent term.
That's all right. That's right. You can say that.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. And I encourage people to go out and get the book. It came out just this past Thursday. Where can they get it? Where can they get the book at? Or this
Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, they can get it at Amazon. And
University
it'll
Press.
probably show up where?
University Press. Or University of Kentucky Press, right?
Yeah, that's the publisher, University Press of Kentucky. But it's available like most any book is at Amazon. You can just, isn't that how people buy books these days?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. If anyone happens to be in Paris, they can find a copy at the farmer's market
Oh,
on High
okay,
Street.
cool. Cool, yeah.
I put a couple of copies there, but I may have to replenish that. I mean, it should eventually be in bookstores. I know eventually Lexington, Joseph Beth or Joseph Beth will carry it. Don't know if they've gotten their copies in, but the quickest would be Amazon.
Amazon, yeah, they get to you quick.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? I know you got more works coming up that come back on the podcast and talk about them when they're ready for release. Anything else?
No. Just a couple of things that we didn't get to, but they're not that related to Green. For example, okay. I have this whole section about what happened to the scumbag Gould, how he went to Las Vegas, not Nevada, but New Mexico, and spent the rest of his life out there. And it's a study in how he survived and failed and then succeeded, or at least got by.
Yeah.
And people's opinion of him.
Because how old would he have been by the time he got out there? You may have mentioned it, but in the book, but I mean, he had to be pretty old. I mean,
not terribly. I think he was in his early 40s.
Okay.
I think he was born in like 41, and this is 84, 85 when went out there, so he would have been 44.
Because he gets out there, and I know he has a few more kids. Marries Texie.
He has 3. Marries Texie, who was a student at Millersburg. Yeah, and
what a long life.
And I've corresponded with his grandson.
That's
son of
nice.
One of those sons, Warren Gould, who was born maybe 1920 something, but long after Gould had died. But he knew Texie because Texie lived until the 1950s.
Wow.
This student that
I guess she was a student at Millersburg, so obviously she was pretty
right. I talk a lot about her and her years at Millersburg, and she's the one that Gould's wife wrote to complain, "Please leave my husband alone." And then she lived till the 1950 something.
Wow.
So it's amazing.
Yeah. That's,
you think it's a long time ago, but
really,
of course the 50s are closer to me than they are to you. But
yeah. Well, I mean, you think about the late 1880s. We're 140 some years ago. That's a long time, obviously, but not as far back as you may think. We talked about the assassination of William Goebel on the podcast many times, and it wasn't as long ago as you think. It was just about 120 years ago.
It was the early 1900s, I think.
Yeah. So pretty good stuff. Again, let us know whenever you get you're ready to put the next book out. Come back on the podcast and talk about it. Also, too, if you listen to this on podcast, you can go over to the YouTube channel, see some pictures while we talk about it, and also see us while we talk about it as well. I don't think we had too many issues. I won't have to edit too much, I guess. We had a little bit of an internet issue, but that'll sound clear whenever you're hearing this. Real quick ask, Facebook, Twitter, do you have any of those things? Does the book have a Facebook page, those sorts of things?
It should, but I don't. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I haven't posted there much. And I'm told I should get on Twitter, and the others, but I haven't.
Well,
Sorry.
you're not missing much. It's okay.
Right.
Facebook
Facebook has kind of a bad odor these days, so
yeah, it
I'm not
does. It
sure I
does.
want to invest in it. Yeah. Where else can I go?
Yeah, I know. I completely understand. If I didn't have a podcast that I posted the stuff on there, I would probably stay clear as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you again for coming on. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you guys reaching out and sending us a copy to read and review. A good history story that I believe everybody can find something in and also connect today. I don't know if people that read it will find, Miss Tarrant or those other connections that I found. I kind of, been a nerd
That's kind of
it.
special. Yeah.
Yeah. But especially if maybe
They might find someone else.
exactly. Yeah. Especially in if you're in and around the Paris, Maysville area, Mason County, those are always the good connections. If you're from the area, you really get a connection to it.
Yeah, there's a lot about Maysville and a lot about Paris.
Yes. Yeah.
In this book,
so again, thank you for coming on. Anything else before we go here?
Just want to say it's been a great pleasure. You're very fun to talk to.
Oh, thank you. I did have somebody once say, man, I was so nervous about doing, and I was like, really? You were nervous to talk to me? I was kind of thinking it's
there's
an
no way
honor.
one could be nervous with you. Yeah, you put him at ease immediately.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. And again, I encourage you to go out and get the book. It's a good book, a good read. There's a picture. If you see, that's Crab Orchard Springs. That's where
There we go.
Yeah. But
saw that. Yeah.
Yep. So thanks again for coming on. We'll have you again, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Till next time.